march of technology in our lifetimes. The first Colossus computer was built in 1944 at Bletchley Park. It had 2,500 vacuum tubes and pulleys, all sorts of mechanical whiz-bangs. Doesn't look anything like what we understand to be a computer nowadays. But it wasn't long, 1950, when we had the first commercial computer. That was the ERA 1101. It still had only 1 megabyte of storage, and it was quite a sizable machine. By 1971, we had teletext on our TVs and put up news headlines and things of that sort, and you could search on your TV for relatively fixed information. The main picture here shows the KDF-9. It was an industrial computer of the 60s and 70s. I used the KDF-9 at Glasgow University. It actually filled the entire basement of the chemistry building. And in order to put a computer program into that computer, you had to type out punch cards. You can see a lady typing out punch cards in one of the pictures. And there's also a picture of the punch cards. You then had to sort them, and you had a big tray of them that were inserted into the computer. Now, as a student, you weren't allowed to touch the computer. You basically left your tray of cards, might have hundreds of cards in the tray, and that was left for a technician to put them through the computer, and then you got a printout the next day of your results. And invariably, you would find there was one comma missing from one of the cards, and you had to search for that comma and redo that card and then put it all in all over again just to get a relatively small program through the computer. By 1975, the first what we call KIPP personal computer was produced, MITS Altair. It sold for just under $300, nearly $400 if you actually had a case on it. It only had 256 bytes of memory, and Bill Gates licensed his basic software with this computer. Really the start of personal computing. In 1976, Queen Elizabeth II sent the first email demo. So email hasn't been around for that long. Also in 1976, the Apple I computer was sold for hobbyists. It was a computer board, and again, there was no case to it. Only 200 were sold, and one of the original 20 Apple I's recently sold for $500,000 at auction. Apple II came out in 1972, and it had the original floppy disks. And also in 1972, the first games console became available, the Atari. It was incredibly successful, and it sold 20 million units. I mean, playing games was available for everybody in their homes. I mean, whereas computing really was much more specialized at that. By 1980, the Commodore released the VIC-20. That was an 8-bit home computer. This was the first home computer to sell more than 1 million units. This is personal computing really starting off in 1980. And by 1984, Apple released its Macintosh computer. It sold for £2,500 at the time, using its floppy disk, which was a little bit smaller and a little bit stiffer than the previous ones. It sold 1.8 million between 1984 and 1990. By 1986, Apple were producing the Macintosh Plus computer. It didn't look very different from it. And also Aldus produced PageMaker software, which really revolutionized home and workplace publishing. And this was the first home computer I bought, and I learnt PageMaker software to do desktop publishing. A lot slower than it is nowadays, but it was a huge advance at that time in 1986. By 1987, European countries had organised themselves to produce a standard for mobile phones, the GSM standard, the Global System for Mobile Communication. And that made it possible to produce and sell mobile phones in the 1990s, all to the same sort of standard throughout Europe and throughout the world, really. The phone that's actually shown to the right of the screen is the Nokia 101, and it was made available from 1992, and at the time it cost £199 to buy, which is quite expensive in those days. By 1989, the first web server was in use, and this photograph shows Sir Tim Berners-Lee, the inventor of the World Wide Web, standing next to the workstation which he ran the web on initially. And it was portable, and he could take it around to different research institutes and universities to let people see what he was actually doing. And really what made the internet possible was connecting individual documents through the web and through the browser and hyperlinks. This is what a browser looked like in 1989, very different from what we think of a browser now. It didn't take long for the web to be opened up for commerce. The first ISP, Internet Service Provider, was The World, set up in the United States, and this is what it looked like in 1989. And only a year later, the first company to adopt digital marketing. Apple had started in 1987, and digital marketing appeared later, around the 1990s. From then on, things just developed so rapidly. Yahoo launched in 1994, Amazon 1994 also. Then Netscape launched, one of the early browsers, in 1995, and from then on, browsers have been competing for dominance in the market. Internet Explorer and Opera browsers were launched in 1995 also, and Google in 1996. The web wasn't available in phones until 2000, and that was on the Ericsson R380. And development was relatively slow from then in terms of internet availability on phones, and it was somewhat limited, not like we know today. Wikipedia launched in 2001, LinkedIn 2002, Skype 2003, MySpace, which is one of the first social media platforms, in 2003. And then Apple also launched its Safari browser then. And from that sort of period, digital marketing jobs started growing. It became important to make your presence known on the internet in order to sell products. Firefox started in 2004, Facebook also 2004, YouTube 2005, Twitter 2006, and the first Kindle ebook reader was launched in 2007, the first iPad 2010, Instagram also 2010, and the Raspberry Pi, where you make a computer from bits and pieces, 2012. 2014, 3 billion users were using the World Wide Web. And in 2015, the Apple Watch was launched. So a huge development over a sort of 20-year period. Every year something was happening, and it's not going to stop. The top 10 developing technology fields in 2020 are listed here: the Internet of Things, You've got all various things in your house talking to each other. 5G coming on stream. Serverless computing. Blockchain to make things like the transfer of money much more secure. Biometrics, where you can your fingerprint on your mobile phone will open it up. Using iris identification in buildings. Robotics. 3D printing. It came into its own really with the coronavirus epidemic, where people were producing face shields with 3D printing. Virtual reality, drones, all of these things developing. And in another couple of years, we'll probably have another 10 things that have spun off these. It's something that the pace is quite incredible.